everyone, I'm Allie Babcock, a registered dietitian with the Lifestyle Medicine program at St. Joe's, and I'm so excited to be cooking with you all today. So from our kitchen here to yours at home, get excited to learn a little bit more about heart health, how we can eat smarter, and make a transition to preventing cardiovascular disease. The recipe that we're going to be cooking today is rich of nutrients that will help us prevent cardiovascular disease and help keep our blood sugar stable. We're really excited to teach you a little bit more about our tips and tricks in the kitchen and how we can help you and your family make smart decisions. All right, so for our recipes today, we're going to be making two recipes in total so that you can make any types of modifications you want for our recipe. We are making a chicken or a tofu stir fry with a few extra ingredients that I like to throw in, and we're going to talk about all of the nutrition and impact that these ingredients are going to have on your health overall. So first things first, we always want to lay out all of our ingredients like I have here. It's called mise en place, or it's a very fancy French word for in place, easy to pour. The reason we want to do this is because whenever you're cooking, especially if you're cooking multiple recipes or things at the same time, we want to make sure we have everything measured and laid out to prevent burning or catastrophes in the kitchen. As a at-home chef, I can tell you that this has been learned from experience. So definitely lay your things out. We also want to make sure, since we are cooking with chicken, that we have a couple different cutting boards. We always want to have a cutting board for our meat produce and our knife that's separate from our produce in order to just make sure that we're being extra safe with our food safety and being sure that we're cooking things to its correct temperature. So first, because our recipe requires some meat and some different things that we're going to pull in and out of the pan, we want to make sure that we're going to start with that first. So first things first, we're going to start cooking our chicken. So I have just a couple of chicken breasts here. The recipe calls for 4 4-ounce chicken breasts, but usually when you actually get a chicken breast in the grocery store, they're quite large. So I want to show you, the first one here is actually going to be 2 serving sizes. And so technically, this is the correct portion size of chicken that you would be serving per one person. This one is a little bit bigger, so maybe if you're looking to have a little bit of extra protein for your individual goals, this would be about 5 ounces. And so in total, we're doing a guesstimation for this recipe. We don't need to be super exact, but I did want to show you what a correct portion size is going to look like. So for this recipe, we want to make sure we're just going to be dicing our chicken. So we're going to be making sure to hold our knife properly so that we don't have any nicks on our fingers. We're making that good claw formation. And we're just going to go across and make some slices. And then we're going to cut it into cubes. Super quick and easy, nothing too complicated for our chicken preparation. If we want to include even more, be even more conscious of our saturated fat content and what we're taking in, we want to think about reducing animal products altogether, which is why the other portions of our recipes here today are going to include some tofu, some beans, and some other plant-based alternatives to protein that you can have in your kitchen on hand. So now that my chicken is in here, I'm just going to wash my hands real quick, and we will be right back for our demonstration. So now that we're back from washing our hands and our chicken's starting to heat up, we're going to season it. You can season your chicken with anything that you have that would fit this recipe. I'm going to be using a little bit of garlic powder and pepper to give things a little bit of extra zing because we're going to include fresh ginger in this recipe. So I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit on top here just to give it a little bit of extra, and then I'm going to toss it around right in our pan just to make sure we season. We always want to season every step of the way when we cook. In the meantime, let's get started with our second alternative recipe. So let's say that for this we are thinking about, instead of using chicken, we want to use a plant-based alternative. So we're going to be using some tofu, beans, and mushrooms to include some extra plant-based protein, some really great sources of fiber, as well as that delicious umami taste that we love when we have meat products, but also specifically any kind of Asian food. So tofu is a soy product. It's made from pressed soybeans and water. And what you get is this brick of tofu here, or brick of soybeans. And what you need to do with tofu to get that really great crisp that you see in restaurants or in videos, anytime you cook it, is to press it. So what we've done is we've wrapped it up in some paper towel and we've pressed it using a can to sit on top in a plate. And so you get a lot of that extra water out, and as you can see, it's not really leaking as much water as it would be if you pulled it right out from that package. So for this recipe, we're going to use about half of the brick of tofu, and we're just going to set this one aside. We don't really need the rest of it. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to make some cubes. So I'm going to slice that brick in half so that I have 2 equal portions, and I'm just going to go ahead and make some cubes for our meal. The smaller you cut tofu, the more liquid or flavor it's going to absorb. Tofu is a really great product to use in any kind of cooking that you're going to be using a sauce, because it's going to absorb the flavor of whatever it's cooked in. So if I was to cut this piece even smaller, we would have even more surface area for that sauce and that deliciousness to absorb. And so that's what we want to do when we cook any kind of plant-based items that are going to have a unique flavor by themselves, but a better one when you put everything together. So moving back over to our stove here, we're going to turn our stove, like I said, always turn it on medium, and we're going to put a little bit more of that oil in the pan. Like I said, you could always use an olive oil, or you could use some broth or water to saute as well. So we're just going to pop those in there. And like I said, we'd always want to season every step of the way. Never unseason your food. You love yourself too much to do that. So we're keeping our recipe and our flavors the same here. And we're just going to want to toss that around to make sure it's all evenly coated. And then the pan will get nice and hot, and we'll start to hear that crisp up as well. So as you can hear probably, our chicken is starting to bubble. It's starting to crisp, which is perfect, exactly what we want it to do. So I'm just going to move over here, and I'm just going to turn it around. And as you can see, the inside is still pink, but the edges are starting to turn white, more consistency of what you think when you think of cooked chicken. So we're just going to turn it around to keep its cooking. And we're just going to let it keep going here while we start to prep the rest of our ingredients. All right, it already smells really good in here, guys. I hope it smells as good in your kitchen as it does here in ours. All right, so back over here, the next thing we want to do is we want to get started on our rice. So what we are using for our recipe today, and kind of the base of our mixture, is we're using a chicken or a tofu mixture that's really going to be rich in all those proteins and vegetables, but we want to put it with something that's going to make it go a little bit farther. And so our selection is rice. So what we are going to be doing is we are using a brown rice. For rice cooking, if you haven't cooked rice before, you can use a rice cooker, you can use a crock pot, you can use an Instapot, but the good old stove and pot work just as well. We're going to be using a brown rice, and rice is always cooked at a 2-to-1 ratio, which means for every cup of rice, you put 2 cups of water. So I have already rinsed this rice, which I highly recommend doing. It helps take some of that starchiness out and makes it extra delicious. And you're just going to put that right into a pot with your water that's already measured. Remember, season as you go, so I also have just a teensy bit of salt in here to give it a little extra kick. You could also use a vegetable broth if you wanted something else. So our rice is in our pot, our stove is turned on, and so all we're going to do is we're going to take that spatula and we're just going to turn it around, and we're just going to let it come up to a boil. Once it's at a boil, we're going to reduce it to a simmer and let it cook off for the remainder of our recipe time. So we're moving over here. We're just going to flip our tofu to make sure it's going to start to sizzle. Tofu is more sensitive when you're cooking it than your chicken will be. So if you lose a few in the pan and they start to crumble a little bit, don't be concerned. It's going to crisp on the edges. So we're already starting to see it's starting to get kind of brown, which is fantastic. And you can always turn your temperature down or up if you need to. So we're just going to come over here and flip our chicken one more time. It's still pink, so I'm going to keep it on here. Keep that heat on, and it'll be good to go. All right, guys. So if you guys are at home with your families and you're cooking in the kitchen, this is a really great point to start your recipe and then invite your family or your little ones in to help you out. So thinking about, back to our recipe here, what are going to be our next steps? I want to be setting up our vegetables. So we have a lot of things to chop and shred here. So the first thing up is this fun thing. This is a green cabbage. It looks like an iceberg lettuce, but it is a member of the family of a cruciferous vegetable. So to prepare it, I'm just going to make it on a flat surface. So I'm going to cut the end off, and I'm going to use half of the cabbage here. And so I'm just going to set this to the side. The rest of this is going to hit face down, and I'm just going to make some nice small slivers through the cabbage, and the cabbage will naturally pull apart. As you can see, it'll kind of just turn into these nice shreds. And so it's a really great vegetable. It's very affordable, very economic, and so it's a great thing to have in your fridge because it also stays forever. So I've done a little bit of pre-work so I didn't have to shred all day long with you guys. I mean, I could talk to you about some of these vegetables and the power here, but I've taking time to shred some carrots. So we're shredding about 4 carrots for this recipe. This is a really great one to do with the kids, particularly kids that just are a little bit older. but you always want to be careful of your fingers here. So I always say, when you get to a point where you think you're at the end, you are at the end. Just stop shredding. It's not worth slicing those fingers up for. And so carrots are really rich in a vitamin called vitamin A. Vitamin A itself is a really great antioxidant, which means that it helps promote the reduction of free radicals in the body. Free radicals are these things that exist because of environmental toxins, stress, and all of the different opportunistic moments we have for things that can eventually harm our vascular tissue and our arteries. And so eating things like carrots that are rich in vitamin A really promote the reduction of that. All right. Well, guys, I am ready to take my tofu off, and I believe my chicken is about done here. And we're just going to take this and we're going to set it on a plate. And we're going to set our pan to the side because we don't need the pan anymore. So just scoop that right onto the plate. Like I said, some of the edges are crispy, some of them are just a little bit brown. They're going to continue to cook up. Ooh, a last one. Here you go. Perfect. And so that's just going to sit on the side here. And then we are going to take our pan and just set it over here because we don't need it anymore. And as we're over here, I noticed also that my rice has come to a boil. So I'm going to give it a quick stir, put the lid on, and reduce that to a low temperature for a simmer. It's a good one. We're just going to let it sit on the stove, and like I said, it's going to take about 25 minutes once it's simmering here to be finished. So for this recipe, we could have easily doubled the amount of chicken that we used, had a really simple seasoning, taken some of this, put it in a Tupperware, and now it's a recipe that you can have for another time. Same with tofu. You can do the exact same thing. These stay in the fridge for about 5 to 7 days. So what we can do is we can double the recipe and then have extra protein, extra ingredients that we can have for lunches. You can put it on a salad, you can throw it in soup, put it in a pasta. All of these things are very simple to do at once, and you're just using a little bit of the time for that. Okay, so next up we're going to make all of our ingredients in all of our vegetables in the pan. So we're going to take the pan that the chicken was in, and we're just going to throw our cabbage right in there. No oils needed for this one because I'm going to use just a little bit of water, and then the cabbage itself is going to give off a lot of water in and of itself. Same with the carrot. So I'm going to take my carrot and ginger mix, and I'm going to throw this right in here. And all of this is going to cook down and be really easy to have just a quick saute. One pan, nothing too complicated about this one. So we're going to do this and then add just a teensy bit of water, like I said, to our pan. And what this is also going to do is help deglaze the pan, which means that all those delicious little bits of flavor that come from the chicken and the oil and the garlic that we put in there is going to come off the bottom of the pan, and it's going to come into the vegetables, which is exactly what we want when we're thinking about flavoring dishes and making them super delicious. So for us, this is just going to simmer a bit. I just turned it down slightly so it doesn't burn. And we are going to move on to some of the other alternative ingredients that I want to talk to you guys about making this transition from a leaner meat source to a plant-based source. And so for these recipes, these are my add-ons that I'm making. I have chosen portobello mushrooms and garbanzo beans. So portobello mushrooms, this is what it looks like. They can come slivered or in caps like this, but they're really nice to add because it gives any kind of Asian fusion dish that you're cooking a nice umami taste, which is the taste that you think of when you think of savory and meat-like. And so I like adding mushrooms to dishes to give that kind of meat substitute flavor. I think it's important to say whenever you're having a plant-based option, it's not going to taste like meat. It isn't meat. It's a different option altogether. But it's important to think about how you can kind of utilize different flavors to give something that you're craving, such as that umami taste in Asian food. And so mushrooms are great for that. So portobello mushrooms here have a really unique flavor by themselves, and I'm going to leave them kind of large because I want to have bits to chew on. And so I've just sliced them and then cut them in half here. There we go. Don't feel bad if they just kind of fall over. No worries at all. All right, super quick. So for me, I'm going to throw everything together because there's nothing wrong with adding extra vegetables into a dish. So it's a really great way to add just a little something extra for perhaps anyone who's eating plant-based, and then you can add the chicken or your meat substitute on top. And so all these things are going right into our dish, super delicious. We're here to stay. The other thing I'm adding are garbanzo beans. Garbanzo beans or chickpeas are these small little round beans here that are, I feel like the most people are familiar with them as the base to hummus or certain dips when they're blended and pureed with different seasonings. But I'm just going to throw them in. The reason I throw in both mushrooms and garbanzo beans is because both of these help to control blood sugar. All of the fiber that's in this between our brown rice, our vegetables, and our beans have extra fiber that helps keep our blood sugar stable throughout the day. So if you're ever thinking, oh, I'm going to have this as a leftover for lunch one day after I make this, it's a really great lunch food because it's going to help you avoid that 3 p.m. lull, as I like to call it, where you feel like you need that maybe third cup of coffee. It's a really great one to have because all of that fiber helps keep our blood sugar stable, and which means we have more energy for a longer period of time. The second reason we're adding garbanzo beans and mushrooms to this recipe is because both of these have certain phytonutrients that are better at helping to keep our blood sugar stable than just fiber alone. Mushrooms have a chemical, a phytonutrient, that means the chemicals from food. And what it is in here is called beta-glucan. And mushrooms have this chemical in them that helps keep your blood sugar stable. So when we're thinking about cardiovascular disease prevention and that A1C number, this is a really great recipe to use to kind of keep all of those things, energy level and A1C in check. The second reason that we want to keep our blood sugar stable is really for weight control. Factors that helps reduce your risk. And so having stable blood sugar helps keep your weight stable because you're able to use energy more efficiently. So if you're planning a workout in the afternoon or the morning, that energy gets used and burned instead of something like it's a little more stable and stays on there. And so all the energy from the food that you're eating instead gets stored in your body's energy stores. So we're going to check our rice real quick, guys, because it's starting to bubble, and I just want to give it a quick little toss. So I'm giving a quick look at this. It looks good. It's starting to plump up. It's still got lots of water. You always want to check your rice whenever you're cooking it on a stovetop to make sure that you're not running out of water, because the last thing you want to do is have some burnt rice. So you just want to plop it in there and give it a quick check. So I'm going to turn the heat up on my vegetables here so they cook a little bit faster for me and let them cook down. The water's already kind of getting absorbed, which is great. And now we're going to move on to making of my sauce. Cannot have Asian food without a good sauce. I would be remiss to think that we could. So for our sauce, it's very simple. All we're going to be using is a little bit of soy sauce and peanut butter. And this sauce is going to go right over top of everything. Our vegetables and our chicken. So another way to kind of think about having lower sodium, which is another thing we want to think about when we're having cardiovascular disease meals that really reduce our risk, is we want to think about our sodium consumption. So even though we've seasoned along the way, we've seasoned with spices, we haven't seasoned with salt. And so the first time we're adding salt to this recipe is actually in our soy sauce. So you always want to select a low sodium soy sauce because it's something that can have a really high sodium content. And then an even better option, if you want the flavor without the sodium, is to choose coconut aminos. And so it has the flavor of that soy sauce without having the sodium added, and it's a nice option for people who are really trying to worry or work on their sodium intake or potentially have hypertension or high blood pressure. So this kind of comes together. It's not going to come completely together, and that's okay. But what we're going to do is we always want to season our way as we go. So we're going to pour that on right here, and we're going to mix it around, and the peanut butter is going to melt. We're going to give it a toss. And as we're doing this, we're probably going to need to just keep adding a little bit of water to make sure that it gets all dissolved in the way that we want it to. Perfect. So incorporating all of these options, all of these vegetables, this is a really great way to have something that is potentially going bad in your fridge or that is kind of a last-ditch pantry meal, but to make it something super delicious. Chances are you have all of these ingredients or could easily get them in a week, and this is something that you can throw together really, really quickly for any kind of Sunday night dinner or weekday in a pinch cookout. It's a really big crowd pleaser. I pretty much, in my family, anything you put peanut butter on, someone's gonna love it. So this is a really great way to get that creamy texture without really having to worry about it. We lost one. If you lose one, just throw them back in. No worries there. All right, so as you can see, the cabbage is starting to wilt down, and we're starting to have the vegetables reduce, which is exactly what we want. So I'm going to move back to my cutting board here. I'm going to give it a quick little cleanup. We always want to clean as we go when we cook because that's the best way to keep a clean area that is easy for you to keep cooking and to not have any kitchen injuries. The last thing we want is a crowded cutting board. So now we're going to talk about toppings and the things I like to add. So when I think about Asian food, things that go really well with Asian food is citrus. I really like to add lime juice, and so I'm going to squeeze just a little bit of lime juice on top of this recipe and on top of our proteins here. All I'm going to do for this is I've given it a quick whirl. I'm going to squeeze it in half, and I'm going to squeeze a little bit of our lime juice onto, ooh, it's a tight one. So if it's a little bit stiff or isn't really ready to be juiced, all you can do is you can take a spoon or a fork and you can just give it a twist, and it makes it a little bit easier to juice. And so I'm going to put that on our proteins, like I said, and then we're going to put the other half in our vegetable dish. The reason that we want to put citrus, other than flavor and that brightness or acidity, onto our proteins is because we want to increase the absorption of iron. Iron is an essential nutrient. We all need iron. It's how we have energy. It's how our blood cells hold on to oxygen. And citrus is something that helps iron absorb. So anytime you put citrus on a protein, particularly a plant protein, it helps that iron get activated and absorbed. Plus it has a really nice flavor, and we're always into flavor. So we're going to come over here, and like I said, we're going to give it a little quick juice of our lime juice onto this. Having lime juice or acids is also a really great spring onions right now. So our spring onions are in season, which means that you can always find really great, beautiful ones at the grocery store. And so to use spring onions, you can cook them, you can use them fresh, but they're really great toppings for Asian food. So I'm just going to take a couple here. I brought them together, and I'm just going to give them a quick slice. And I'm not even going to saute them. They're going to be a topper. So I'm just going to come across to have this bright, beautiful green color on top of our dish. And it's a really great way to add just one more vegetable into our day. Our goal for cooking and for eating is always to have as many fruits and vegetables as possible. But what is a goal? If you need a number, what should we recommend? Our recommendations is that you try and have 10 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. So for a lot of people, that can be a lot, especially if you're new to cooking vegetables and this is something that you want to get started. And so my recommendations are two. First, start small. Adding just one more vegetable a day is still the direction in the transition of the path that you want to go. Switching from red meat to white meat is still the direction that we want to go for preventing heart disease and for helping ourselves long-term prevent other chronic diseases. But adding in one or more vegetables is a great start. But working our way up to the goal, challenge yourself. How can you incorporate as many vegetables as possible? In this dish alone, by adding in our other ingredients, we have already had our carrots, our cabbage, our mushrooms, our garbanzo beans, and our spring onions. So 5 vegetables just in this dish alone, which is a really great way to add that extra layers in. So you can easily spread out your 5 fruits and vegetables among the other parts in your day and have all of that variety and all of that fiber that you need. When we talk about fiber, we've talked about it a little bit tonight, about why we need to have it, why it's so good for our body and our blood sugar. But the other thing to think about with fiber is that a lot of Americans don't get enough. The recommendation for daily fiber intake is about a minimum of 25 to 35 grams, depending on if you're a male or female. And what we know is that most of Americans don't even come close to getting that much. And so what we end up relying on is fiber supplements. But fiber supplements come with a lot of different things that we don't necessarily want in our body. And so what we do instead is eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. And so this recipe itself has lots of fiber in it because of all the different ingredients that we added in the fruits and vegetables themselves. All right. So our cabbage is cooking down here really well. So are our carrots. It smells absolutely incredible. I hope it smells as good in your kitchen. The peanut butter is starting to melt. It's super creamy and delicious. And so now we're thinking about serving our options. So I want to come back here and I want to check our brown rice just to see how it's going. The water should be mostly absorbed, if not all absorbed. Mine is, so I'm giving it a quick fluff. Then I'm going to give it a test. So I just grab some rice here and all I'm going to do is pull it out and I want to squish it between my fingers. If it squishes, it's done. And then you just want to take it off of the heat and let some of the heat escape so it doesn't keep cooking. All right. So now, a serving of rice is between, depending on your energy needs, is between a fourth of a cup and about a half of a cup of rice. So to plate it, if you're plating it for a family style meal, it's a really great way to plate some options. I like to include my protein on the side and then take a couple of scoops of rice directly onto my plate. So let's say this is for a family of 4. So this would be about the serving for family of 4 for this big plate here. And then we come over and we're going to top with our delicious vegetables. And so when you're thinking about plating, this is a shared plate, keep in mind for portion sizing, but we still want it to look the same. We want about half of our plate to be filled with fruits and vegetables and about a quarter of our plate to be filled with proteins and then another quarter to be filled with starchy fruits and vegetables or grains. And so this is what our plant-based option is going to look like. And we're going to come over here, we're going to top it with our spring onions and a little bit of our chopped peanuts. So you can buy these salted or roasted, it's up to you, whatever you guys desire. And then for our protein plate, we're going to do the same. We're going to build it all together in a bowl. And I have a little bit of a bigger serving plate here for us. And so I'm going to mix all of this together. I have my chicken. Got my rice coming on. Excellent. It smells incredible in here, you guys. And then we're going to come over, we're going to make sure all of our burners are turned off. And we're going to serve up the rest of our ingredients. And so this is a really great meal to have and then to cook cook and then to save for lunch for the next day. It stores really well. You can even just take some of this right from the kitchen into a Tupperware or a container or a jar so that you can take it for lunch or plan to have it for lunch the next day. And then you can also anticipate that this is going to sit really well. So this is going to stay in the fridge for about 5 days, even just cooked like this. And it's a great thing to have to grab and to have on hand. So we're adding in our spring onions, our peanuts, and voila, that's it, we're done. I really have had so much fun cooking with you guys tonight, and I hope you had as much fun as I did. We have these 2 beautiful options for a plant-based or a leaner alternative for our heart health from our vegetable Asian sauté. And it's going to taste, I hope, as delicious as it smells. And so thank you guys so much for having me cook with you guys, and I will be available for any questions.